Everybody, thank you very much for joining us. And what we're going to be doing today is talking about understanding oats and their nutritional benefits. And I'm absolutely delighted that we have Dr. Pippa Gibson, who's one of my colleagues at the British Nutrition Foundation. She's one of our senior nutrition scientists, and she's going to be taking most of the webinar today, talking about oats and their nutritional benefits. And then at the end, I will come back and talk a little bit more about production and processing of oats and resources and things like that. So it's been fantastic to see all the names and workplaces that people have been putting in the chat box. So if you haven't done that yet, please do. And if you've got any questions as we go along, then please pop them in chat box, and then Pippa or either I will be able to answer them at the end. I also have my colleague Ewan and Orla on the line as well. So if there are any questions, particularly any technical questions, they'll be able to answer those. Okay, so before we start properly, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. So the webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the Food Effect of Life website in a couple of days. As I mentioned, if you've got any questions, if you can pop them in the chat box, and they'll be answered at the end. And then at the end of the webinar, when we finish, there'll be a short online evaluation. If you wanted to get ahead, the actual QR code is on the slide at the moment, so you could actually take a quick photograph of that and use that for the evaluation. If not, we'll put a link at the end. But once you've completed the evaluation, you'll be given a link to a downloadable certificate that you could download, add your name to it, and then print it for your records. Okay, so understanding oats and their nutritional benefits. So what we're going to cover is the whole role of whole grains in the diet, nutrition and health claims relating to oats, how oats can help with cholesterol levels, busting nutrition myths around oats, oats production, processing and trends, a little bit about links to Food Effect of Life resources, and then any suggestions for further reading and sources of information. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unshare and allow Pippa to then share her slides, and then she'll be able to give herself a little bit of an introduction and then take you through her presentation. So thank you very much, Pippa.
So thank you so much for having me to present. As Francis said, I also work at the British Nutrition Foundation. I'm a senior nutrition scientist. I've been there for about 1.5 years, and before I used to do contract catering, and before then I used to also do nutritional research as well within the universities. So I'm just going to go through what whole grains are. So whole grains are where we've got grains that are intact, and they contain all 3 parts of the grain kernel. So you can see we've got the bran here, we've got the endosperm, we've got the germ. And to be classified as a whole grain, these 3 components need to be present in the same proportions as when they were harvested. So that means they're effectively keeping their natural fibre, the vitamins, the minerals, and some of the beneficial plant compounds. Refined grains, as sort of shown here in sort of the right side of the image, have had the bran and the germ removed. So they're missing some of the fibre as well as some of the nutrients that we might find in the whole grains. And so there is a definition. So it's the intact, ground, cracked or flaked or otherwise processed kernel after the removal of the inedible parts such as the hull and the husk. And all of these parts of the components, including the endosperm, the germ and the bran, must be present in that same relative proportion as the intact kernel. And that comes from the consensus global definitions of whole grains as a food ingredient and of whole grain foods presented on behalf of the Whole Grain Initiative. We have got lots of whole grains in our the UK's Eat Well guide. This shows the recommended dietary guidelines for eating within the UK. It has a section dedicated to potatoes, bread, rice, pasta and other starchy carbohydrates. We also recommend, as part of our dietary recommendations, to choose whole grain or other higher fibre varieties, indicating towards more whole grains in our diet. And including whole grains in the diet is important for our health, because they are linked with things like lower risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, some forms of cancer, as well as better digestive health. And they also can help with other aspects of health, such as blood glucose or sugar control. So we'll have a little look at that later, as well as supporting gut bacteria, gut health, and can help to make you feel fuller and for longer. And so common whole grains do include things like our oats, but as you can see here, we've got quite a few different and some exotic whole grains in this picture. But another sort of thing to just remind you of is that oats are naturally gluten-free. They do, however, contain something called avenin, which is a protein that's really similar to gluten. So whilst most celiacs can tolerate oats, there are some who can't unfortunately tolerate oats, and they would know about that themselves. But you do need to make sure that if you are going for gluten-free, you do buy gluten-free oats, because the way that they are manufactured can mean that oats often processed in some of the some factories that have other gluten containing grains, and therefore it can be contaminated. So do make sure that you are buying the ones that do have sort of gluten-free written on them if you need them to be gluten-free. Currently, there is no advice on the amount of whole grains that we should be eating within the UK, but the Eat Well guide does recommend that we should have about a third of our foods coming from starchy foods, starchy carbohydrates, and again, choosing those that are higher in fibre and whole grain varieties wherever possible. But if we were to look at the Eat Lancet Commission on Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems, it recommends having 232 grams of whole grains per day, and experts from other countries suggest aiming for around 3 servings a day. And what that would roughly be is about so 1 tablespoon, which is about 15 grams of uncooked oats, counts as a serving. So you're talking about 3 tablespoons of oats. But despite this, there was a survey conducted by the British Dietetic Association, which highlighted that 95% of adults don't eat enough whole grains, and nearly a third get no whole grains at all. And whole grains are really important, a really important element of our diet, because dietary fibre intakes are significantly lower than our UK government recommendations. So we're eating, on average as adults, about 19.7 grams of fibre per day, whereas the recommendation is 30 grams per day. And a diet higher in fibre is important for overall health and can support things like healthy digestion, regular bowel movements, and can reduce the risk of things like constipation and bowel cancer. And also, in addition, diets that are higher in fibre can reduce the risk of some diseases such as heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. So there is clearly a need for us to try to help bridge the fibre gap. And here is some of the reasons why I think that oats can really have help in bridging that fibre gap. So if we're just to look at oats, they're one of the most commonly consumed cereals worldwide, which is eaten in whole grain form. And there's been a lot of research that have looked at the health effects of oats, and that's resulted in 4 health claims that are authorised for the use in the European Union and in Great Britain. So I'll come on to those later. And whole grains are widely recognised to have a positive role in a healthy and balanced diet. We frequently eat them as things like porridge, but they are a versatile cooking ingredient, and I'll get to that later. So it's just important to remember that the 3 components of the oat grain provide different levels of nutrients within it. So that the bran, the endosperm and the germ, as I showed before. So just making sure that you're consuming the whole grain. And that's how you can get sort of the best nutritional value from oats as well as other whole grains. And the greatest benefit comes from oats that are kept whole or as large as possible. So you might have seen things like instant or quick cook oats, and while they do still contain the fibre and the nutrients, in some cases they don't have the same effect as things like jumbo oats, because they are chopped up And then they have, and that has a different effect on our body for things like gut transit, which is the rate that food can move through the body, blood glucose levels or blood glucose controls, where you get a higher increase in blood sugar levels in comparison to having sort of the jumbo rolled oats, and that can also affect things like satiety, which is the feeling of fullness that we get after eating foods. So with that in mind, let's just have a quick look at overview of oats. So oats by themselves provide us with energy. They provide us with dietary carbohydrates that sort of help power our body, and they also contain protein and are high in fiber. So they've got lots of things going for them that are good. So that's on a sort of macronutrient level. If we were to delve a little deeper, we've got some micronutrients where they've got they're a good source of a number of different micronutrients, and I've just pulled out some of the micronutrients, the vitamins and the minerals, which are sort of relevant and present in quantities that really do contribute to your dietary intake, and quite a few of these micronutrients are at levels high enough for companies to be able to make a health claim in the UK and the EU. So, for example, if I was just to look at thiamine, or this is vitamin B1, it contributes to normal energy yielding metabolism, function of the nervous system, psychological function and function of the heart. And as you can see in the right hand column, per 100 grams of oats, it would provide 95% of your nutrient reference value as calculated by the EU labelling values. That just means that it's contributing quite a lot. And even if you were to have sort of that 45 gram portion that we were saying is sort of about 3 tablespoons, that's going to contribute to almost half of your vitamin B1 daily requirements. And that's just from having something like porridge in the morning. So they can be a really great source of micronutrients in the diet. And separately to vitamins and minerals, you'll also find that they contain beta glucans. So oats contain beta glucans, and the beta glucans are a type of soluble fiber. It's found in a few foods naturally, so oats, but also barley, and more recently mushrooms. So if we were to look at oats, about 100 grams of oats will typically contain around 4 to 6 grams of beta glucan per 100 grams. Does vary between batches, where it's grown, etc., but that gives you a bit of a rough value of how much it would contain. In barley, which is in the middle, it has a large range as well, around 2 to 20 grams of beta glucans per 100 grams. So you could argue that barley can give you a better bang for your buck, but barley is slightly more expensive, but it can be a little bit higher in terms of beta glucans. And they're also found in mushrooms. Now, the beta glucans that are found in mushrooms are slightly different in terms of structure from the ones that are found in oats and barley. And the structural difference just means that mushrooms, the beta glucans in the mushrooms actually have more of an effect on the immune system rather than the oats and the barley, which have a sort of a better effect in terms of digestion and heart health, which we'll get to later. So the beta glucans are present in lots of different mushrooms, but things like your shiitake, your oyster and reishi, so not your standard button mushrooms, unfortunately. And again, they do vary with the type of mushroom where they're grown. But also, if you were to use dried mushrooms, obviously, when you're taking away the water, the beta glucan content would be significantly increased. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, to get the health benefits of the beta glucans, particularly when we're talking about the oat and barley beta glucans, studies have shown a dosage of 3 grams per day to help lower cholesterol from oats and barley. So again, just thinking back to that recommendation of 3 tablespoons, around 45 grams of porridge oats for breakfast, then that provides you close to around 3 grams of beta glucan. So you can help get the benefits from the oats in just one meal. The reason that oats are so good for us is related to some of the health claims that we've got that we're allowed to apply when we're talking about oats. So oats and beta glucans do have these authorized health claims as long as they meet the right conditions. So they do come with conditions. The first health claim is that consumption of beta glucans from oats and barley as part of a meal contributes to the reduction of blood glucose rise after the meal. So that just basically means that your blood glucose levels might be a little bit more steady after you've had that meal. And then there are two that are related to blood cholesterol. So one specifically on oat beta glucans and one on beta glucans in general. And then the final one is about the role of oat grain fiber contributing to increase in fecal bulk. So those are the authorized health claims that can be used by companies if they're selling something that contains oats, and in particular amounts, which we'll get to in a moment. So I'm going to talk about the health benefits of oats. So one of the biggest ones is around cholesterol reduction, and as part of a healthy and balanced varied diet, consumption of oats can help to lower blood cholesterol levels, and high cholesterol levels are a recognized risk factor for cardiovascular disease, which is a leading cause of premature mortality. So I'm hoping that everyone has heard of the two types of cholesterol. So we've got high density lipoprotein, or HDL, and low density lipoprotein, or LDL. And they're also sometimes referred to as good and bad cholesterol as well. So just to give you a little bit of an idea around that. But total levels of cholesterol, as well as high levels of LDL, the bad cholesterol, are risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Beta glucan is or has been shown to have benefits around the body in terms of cardiovascular health. So there's been a lot of research that has been reviewed by a group of people called the European Food Safety Authority, and they helped come up with things like our health claims. And they suggest that the daily consumption of at least 3 grams beta glucans has been shown to statistically significantly decrease LDL cholesterol concentrations. And the level of reduction is variable. And studies have demonstrated a reduction in cholesterol of around 5 to 10% in this particular study. But we also have a meta-analysis study, which is where you take a lot of different studies and the results are pulled together to check for a meaningful effect over a larger population of people. So really pulling together lots and lots of information so that you can have results from different population groups, for example. This particular one looked at 58 different trials, and it demonstrated an average of 4.2% reduction when consuming 3.5 grams of beta glucan per day. So I can hear you all saying, how do oats work their magic? So here's our digestive tract, and what happens normally is that we've got cholesterol, which is used in the liver. So it's just popping up there, coming through into the liver. They produce bile acids, which are essential for absorbing and digesting dietary fats that we consume. And the bile acids are secreted into the intestine, where they help to emulsify the fats during digestion. Once they have done this job, around 95% of the bile acids are reabsorbed into the small intestine, where they return to the bloodstream and they get transported back to the liver. And this has a very scientific or sciencey sounding name called enterohepatic circulation, which is basically where the body is able to reuse these bile acids, sort of recycle them, reducing the need to make more of them. Therefore, the body doesn't need to use as much cholesterol to replenish them. And that means that our LDL bad cholesterol can remain in circulation at those high levels that we don't necessarily want, which isn't so good for our body. So if we were to look at what happens when we're eating oats or beta glucans. The main mechanism for lowering blood cholesterol from oats is through the binding of beta glucan and bile acids in the gut, which prevents the normal reabsorption of bile acids and leads to their excretion in our feces. So we still have cholesterol being used to make the bile acids as we did before. But when we eat oats, and therefore beta glucans, they travel down through the stomach and they form a thick viscous gel in the gut. So just think about when you make your porridge and you heat it and it kind of gets a little bit gloopy. So it's kind of forming that sort of sticky mixture. The bile acids then get mixed with this thick gel and trap them. And as a result, they are excreted in the stools. And this disrupts that enterohepatic recycling of bile acids, and the liver extracts cholesterol from the blood to replenish the bile acid pool, and therefore this has an overall effect of reducing blood LDL cholesterol levels. So I appreciate that that's quite a lot of information there. So I'm just going to very quickly do a quick recap for you. So when we eat beta glucans from oats, they form a thick viscous gel, and this gel traps the bile acids and prevents them from being reabsorbed. This results in more bile acids, which are results in the bile acids being excreted in the stool, and therefore the liver has to use more blood LDL cholesterol to make more bile acids, which overall helps to lower the LDL cholesterol levels in your blood, which is a good thing. And this has been tested by lots of different scientific groups, and so there are 2 authorized health claims associated to oats and beta glucans, and the reduction and maintenance of blood cholesterol levels. So these claims can be used for foods that provide at least 1 gram of beta glucan per portion, and information must be given to the consumer that the beneficial effect is gained with a daily intake of 3 grams of beta glucans per day. So it's got conditions around how they can use it. So if you think back to that diagram, when you get those bile acids that are trapped when you've had the beta glucan from that thick gel that's formed when you eat them, it's actually you're going to get a better effect if you have beta glucans throughout the day, so that you've got sort of more viscous gel to trap more of the bile acids over a long period of time. So it's great to have porridge and kind of get your close to 3 grams of beta glucan in per day, but how might you be able to spread the beta glucans out throughout the day to have an even better effect if you've got, for example, high cholesterol? So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into how cholesterol can be impacted by oats and the beta glucan. I'm going to do a couple of other areas of interest. One of them is blood sugar control and diabetes management. So blood glucose levels rise following the consumption of carbohydrate containing foods, completely normal. And what happens is that once we've eaten these carbohydrate containing foods, insulin, which is a type of hormone our body makes, is released, and that stimulates our body to take up the glucose into our cells. Completely normal physiological response to eating carbohydrate containing foods. So in this graph, you can see a spike in blue is the insulin, but we've also got the orange, which is the glucose from the foods that we've eaten, and I've put in some arrows as to, you can see you've eaten and then there's a little response afterwards, you've eaten again and there's another little response afterwards. Now this is representative of like a healthy individual. So if, for example, you might not be so healthy, you might have something that's called insulin resistance, or and that insulin resistance is where the insulin produced is not effective, so it might not quite be the right shape to work properly, and therefore it can't help the glucose move into the cells in the body, and then the blood glucose levels can increase, and that can cause, for example, your body to go, oh, I need to make more insulin, and it keeps releasing insulin which isn't effective, and then that can, you know, have an impact on us because we're not being able to manage our blood glucose levels properly. This might be seen in individuals who are living with overweight or obesity, and it's just one of the consequences that we do see. It can lead to impaired glucose tolerance, insulin resistance, which can lead to things like diabetes, which you might have heard of, where you need to really manage what you're eating. And there are two different types of diabetes, and this one would be type 2 diabetes, which is again more closely related to those who are living with overweight or obesity. So there are several mechanisms by which oats can reduce the rate at which our blood glucose levels can rise, again through that beta glucan activity. The most convincing evidence that we have from the scientific studies is that beta glucans slow the gastric emptying, which is the rate at which food leaves the stomach, because it's formed that gel-like consistency in the stomach. So it's harder to move through. It doesn't empty as quickly. It just increases sort of the viscosity, and therefore it just slows down the rate that it's passed into the small intestine. And again, that delay in gastric emptying can make you feel a little bit fuller for longer, but then it has an impact on our glucose absorption, because the food is released more slowly over a slightly longer period of time, and it reduces the postprandial, which is so the after meal. So postprandial means just after the meal, blood sugar spikes. And this can help to control our blood glucose levels, because it's not all happening at the same time. It's a little bit like if you're thinking about traffic, if we can slow the traffic down, we won't get so many traffic jams. The same thing's happening within our bodies. And intervention studies in both healthy and diabetic subjects have shown a reduction in postprandial glycemic and insulin responses following the consumption of oat beta-glucans. We also have a meta-analysis demonstrating a reduced relative risk for people that were consuming oats compared to those that weren't consuming oats, and those who had type 2 diabetes as well. So again, it's a really important thing to try to incorporate into your diet if you can, regardless of whether you are healthy or perhaps living with diabetes. And as such, there is one health claim that is authorised for the use in Great Britain, which is the effect of oat and barley beta-glucan as part of a meal, contributing to the reduction of the blood glucose rise after that meal. And again, that health claim has conditions. It can only be used for foods that contain at least 4 grams of beta-glucans from oat or barley for each 30 grams of available carbohydrate in a quantified portion as part of the meal. So again, got a few hurdles to jump through it. So when you're looking and you see a health claim, they have got quite a few different conditions attached to it. So just a very quick blood sugar recap, that they can help to improve our after eating blood glucose and insulin responses, and you just need to consider how these oats might be processed. So again, we were talking about before jumbo oats being superior in terms of some of the benefits to quick cook and instant sort of oat type products. So again, it's really important to just think about how they might have an effect on glycemic control. So I would also just sort of say, watch out for some of these products, you know, instant oats, instant porridges that might have added sugars in them as well. And again, remember, if you want to have some of these health benefits, it's actually 3 to 4 grams of beta glucans per day, which is achievable, but it does require you to eat sort of a few portions of oats or barley as part of your diet. I'm going to just quickly talk about gut health and digestion. So we know that the oats are a great source of dietary fiber and soluble fiber in the form of beta glucans, and that can influence our digestive and gut health. So not only do beta glucans form a gel which helps to sort of trap those bile acids and reduce the bad cholesterol levels, the gel also can help to increase stool bulk. That can help promote more regular bowel movements, which is always great because it can help relieve things like constipation, especially in participants or people that have lower fiber intakes. And the gel forming nature of the beta glucans can also support things like our gut transit times. It can accelerate transit times in some cases where dietary fiber intakes are low. So it just means that you're able to pass a stool slightly quicker. That can be really beneficial because actually we know that from studies, regular bowel movements are beneficial for our bodies. These beta glucans also have a prebiotic effect where they are fermented by beneficial bacteria, and the result of that is that you have increased production of something called short chain fatty acids. You might have heard of some of these. They are sort of being used a bit more around sort of gut health. And as the name indicates, they are acids. They help to lower the pH in the colon, and this helps to do things like inhibit harmful bacteria that might be there. They also have a beneficial effect on the gut barrier function and the immune modulation. So our 70% of our immune cells actually reside within our gut. So actually it's really important to look after your gut so that you can stay well. And this is because these short chain fatty acids can help with the lining of our gut to help regulate things like our immune responses, and also reduce things that might be a little bit inflammatory within our gut as well. So if we're looking at that barrier function, it's like our internal skin, and beta glucans can help enhance something called tight junction protein expression. So on the left hand side you can see these sort of blue equals lines that are linking the cells together, and that can help to reduce intestinal permeability. But on the right hand side you can see that we have got something that's called a leaky gut, and so we have things like toxins and pathogens and even undigested food entering the bloodstream, and that causes an inflammatory response and digestive problems, including things like irritable bowel syndrome, which you might have heard for. And so the role of these insoluble fibers found in oats has got an established effect on fecal bulking, and it has an authorised health claim for the UK for oat grain fibre and fecal bulk. So again, contributes to an increase in fecal bulk. So it can be used on foods which are high in fibre and referred to in the nutrition claim for high fibre. So it has to contain at least 6 grams of fibre per 100 grams, and oats by themselves contain 7.8 grams of fibre per 100 grams, as I showed you at the start. So again, they meet that requirement for a health claim, but it's a little bit bulky. So it's not exactly the friendliest authorised health claim that we have. I'm just going to very quickly come on to some oat misconceptions. You might have heard that oat or perhaps oat milk spikes your blood sugar levels. It's been doing the rounds on various social media platforms. And so hopefully some of the evidence that I've been sharing with you today indicates that oats are a part or can be part of a healthy and balanced diet. And although eating oats can increase your blood glucose levels, as would be expected with any carbohydrate containing food, it's our normal physiological response. And the degree to which they have been processed, those oats, has an impact on blood glucose levels when we're eating them. So if we were to look at oat milk, then this is probably one of the most processed forms of oats that we can get. However, it doesn't mean that they can't form part of a healthy and balanced diet. It still contains, the oat milk still contains beta glucans. And if we're having it in our teas or coffees or in smaller amounts, it's not going to have a significant effect on our blood glucose levels. And if we were to think about oats and other oat products, they can be really beneficial if we are pairing them with other foods that are good for us, such as nuts and seeds, which help to add fibre as well as healthy fats and sources of proteins. That makes a bit of more of a balanced meal, and again just means that we aren't going to get huge sugar spikes like we're told that we will on social media. And another trend is that oats can have a positive effect on gut-derived satiety signals. So you might have heard of GLP-1 more recently, and that's a drug, or there are a range of drugs that can have an effect on how full we feel in response with weight management. So there's been a rise recently in something called Ozempic, not Ozempic, but Oatsempic, and it's kind of a play on the drug's name. And this involves blending oats with water and lime juice. I don't know why it's those, but it creates an apparent weight loss food, and it's again the latest sort of fad diet. So I'm absolutely not recommending this, but it has been doing its rounds on social media and heralded as the latest weight loss regime. So if you think about the process of blending the oats and the fact that they are processed with water, it's probably not going to be very satiating in terms of like making you feel full, as if we were to think about whole rolled oats with porridge made with milk, which will provide protein as well as potentially some fat, depending on the type of milk that you use. And you compare it again with some other foods that will help slow down digestion, such as nuts or seeds, to provide fiber and protein and healthy fats. So just stick with things like the porridge or overnight oats to help add those things to help you feel a little bit fuller for longer. So a quick summary. Hopefully you have a better understanding about oats and how they're good sources of fiber, and most of that fiber is found as beta glucan, and that's how oats exert their beneficial effect, reducing cholesterol through different mechanisms, including trapping the bile acid, increasing excretion and reducing cholesterol absorption. We also have slowing down gastric emptying, which can help improve glycemic control by reducing blood spikes in postprandial and blood glucose rises. We also know that the slowing of gastric emptying can help improve things like satiety, so you feel fuller for longer. And we know that the beta glucans can act as a prebiotic, so they help feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut, improving digestive health, and also the production of those short chain fatty acids that actually have far-reaching capabilities around the body, not just within the gut, as well as my favorite, obviously, is increasing fecal bulk. So just before I hand back over to Francis, I just wanted to have a quick look at some ways that we can incorporate oats into our diet. Obviously, it goes without saying that we can have porridge, but there can be other things such as overnight oats. We can incorporate them through flapjacks. We can have them as muffins, where you can either add them as rolled oats, or you can blend the oats to make an oat flour. You can also make bircher muesli or energy bars, or use them for sweet or savoury crumbles. All of these recipes are from the Food A Fact of Life website. So Francis has very kindly provided the links to these, so you'll be able to access these in the notes after they're sent out after today. So I'm going to hand back to Francis for her to, oh, how do I, there we go. So she can share her screen. And I think that we're going to take questions right at the end. Is that right, Francis?
Yes, we are, Pippa. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you. And a number of people have said how beautifully explained some of the bits were. So thank you very much. There are quite a few questions in the chat. So when I move on to the next bit, I don't know whether you wanted to have a quick look through the chat and either answer the questions in the chat or sort of be prepared at the end to cover them. So that's fantastic. Right, I'm going to just share my PowerPoint again and then just go through a few final things before we finish. So hopefully it's coming now. Right, okay. Right, hopefully you can see my slides. Pippa, could you just possibly let me know that you can see them?
Yeah, we can see them.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm just going to do just a couple of slides just about oat production and just give you a bit of an outline of some trends around oats. A couple of people have put in the chat some questions around oat milk, so I'll mention that, and then also some resources from Food Effective Life that might be able to support your teaching and understanding around oats. So oats are the third main crop grown in the UK, and farmers produce an amazing 1 million tonnes per year. Oats are planted in September and then harvested the following August. And then obviously the harvesting process, part of that removes the grains from the plant. So very simple. And if you're after more information about the processing and the production of oats, we do have resources on the Food Effective Life website, which I will show you some links to in a minute. I thought this was quite interesting. Some stats from the last full crop season, which was the 1st of July 23 to the 30th of June 2024. So 500,000 tonnes of oats were milled in the UK. So this is about milling rather than growing. But the vast majority of those were grown in the UK, and just under 215,000 tonnes of oat flakes were rolled and then created into oat flakes as well. And then the remainder was then made into flour and other cuts. So you can see it's sort of quite a variety of the different ways that oats are actually used. Just quick thing about production. So Pippa had mentioned the different types of oats, or the different ways that they're produced and the different kind of products that they're used in. So you've got the rolled oats, which Pippa has said definitely the best ones to use if you can for the nutritional benefits. And then you've got oatmeal, and the bran has been removed from that. You've got pinhead oats, as often known as coarse oatmeal or steel cut oats. And then you've got oat flour, and then this is finer than oatmeal, and it's made by grinding and sieving the oats. So there's lots of different ways that you can consume oats, but as Pippa said, the rolled oats are definitely the best way to get the best nutrition from your oats. A little bit about trends, and just did a bit of research thinking around the oat milk trend. So I thought this was quite interesting from Kantar to say that 35% of households purchased plant-based milk at least once in 2023, and then nearly 3/4 making multiple purchases. And actually oat milk has actually overtaken in the UK other milks, other plant-based milks, as the most popular milk across Europe and the rest of the world. It's soya and also other other milks, which are actually more popular than oats, but in the UK it's oats, and that's actually quite a lot of oat milk that's actually drunk daily, which is quite incredible, really. Just something just to build on the nutrition that Pippa's been talking about is about fortification of oat drinks. So it's very important that if plant-based drinks are chosen, that they are fortified. And particularly in this country, we have a nutrient of concern, which is iodine, and that's important for teenage girls. So when you're looking for plant-based drinks, making sure that they are fortified, and particularly looking out for iodine, because the level of iodine varies in the different types of oat milk that you might buy and the different brands. And iodine is important because it helps to make thyroid hormones, and it helps the brain to function normally. Now, in this country, we have low iodine intakes and status, particularly for teenage girls. But so what we've got to think about is a concern that there might be in relation to pregnancy and cognitive development in children, which then can lead to potential impact on cognitive abilities in children. So it's one of those nutrients that perhaps people aren't necessarily aware of, but it's definitely one thing that you should be looking out for if you are drinking plant-based milks, because otherwise, if you were drinking dairy milks, you would be getting iodine from that, because the most common source of iodine in our diets normally would be dairy foods and sort of milks and cheeses. So do make sure that you're looking out for that if you are drinking oat milk or any other plant-based milks. The other thing I did was have a quick look at oat trends. So I went on TikTok and had a look at the number of posts that were related to oats. And this is just incredible, really. It's obviously one of those things that's really sort of taken people's imagination. And just thinking about oatmeal, you've got 133 million posts. Baked oats recipes, I have to say I have baked oats most days, over 110 million posts. So it really is something that has really grabbed people, and people can really see the benefits of oats. Just quickly to finish off, just some resources that you might find on Food A Fact of Life that would be useful for you. So we've got a couple of presentations around oat farming and processing. We also have got a poster, which is quite nice, which is a nice colourful poster, and some knowledge organisers, which are around cereals, which include oats. We've got a grain chain game, so pupils need to identify what the grains are. And then also we've got lots of recipes, as Pippa mentioned. And then just wanted to mention our sustainable healthy food resources, because again, when I was looking into oat milk, I noticed that one particular supplier or producer has decided recently to use only UK and local oats in their particular brand of oat milk. And so I just thought, well, that's really interesting from a sustainability point of view. So then I thought actually it'd be quite useful to share some sustainability resources that we've recently created. So on the Food A Fact of Life website, we have resources for secondary age pupils, so 11 to 14 and 14 to 16. And then very shortly, we're going to have some for primary pupils and then early years pupils as well. So if sustainability is something you're particularly interested in, then do have a look at those. A little bit about some more training within Food A Fact of Life. So we've got some online modular courses that you might be interested in. So some around functional properties of food, the sensory science, food spoilage, hygiene and safety, and then some characteristics of good practice in teaching. Now, these are all free online modular courses. So if it's something you are interested in, then do take a look. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, all our webinars are recorded, and you'll find all those recordings on our YouTube channel or on the Food A Fact of Life website. And we've had a few this year which have been relating to the Eat Well guide. So we had an introduction, and then we had one which was more in depth. And then we also had a really interesting webinar which was around allergens and adverse reactions to foods and managing allergens in a classroom. So those are all available online if you wanted to have a look at those. You're hopefully already signed up for our newsletter, so our education news. If not, you can do that on our website. We also have a PPD newsletter, which is our training newsletter, which is a bit more ad hoc. So that's as and when we've got training, we'll send that out. We've got Twitter or X. And then we've also got an education inbox. So if you've got any questions, you could then send those to education@nutrition.org.uk, and we can answer those, or we can pass them on to Pippa.
Well, I'll answer this one. So would I recommend Oatabix over Weetabix? And then also the appreciation that whole rolled oats likely will be less processed, etc. So again, I think it just comes down to a little bit of preference. If you're getting a whole grain in, absolutely fine, doesn't matter really what it is. If, for example, you do know that you have high cholesterol in your family, for example, again, it can be a precautionary measure. If you haven't, for example, had a test and you just want to make sure that you're consuming things that are going to help keep you healthy and stay off things like drugs that you might be recommended. So I think it is down to a little bit of preference as to what you like. And if, you can absolutely try them, you can mix them up. It's great if you can have Weetabix and Oatabix, because you're getting a little bit more diversity for your gut health. But again, it comes down to a little bit of preference. If you can include oats as part of your diet, I would sort of recommend that you try to wherever you can. I hope that answers that question. Someone has sort of mentioned about making their own oat milk, where they're blending the oats with water and sort of you can strain it to make your own oat milk. But they've said they've gone back to the shop bought as well, worried about the nutrients not being there. So how nutrient dense is making your own. You're not going to get the fortification that Frances has just talked about. So you'll be missing things like calcium, vitamin B12, and iodine, and even vitamin D. So I think it is really important that if you are replacing a significant amount of dairy with your own oat milk, for example, you're making sure that you go for the fortified ones. And again, if you're replacing for an organic oat milk, they aren't fortified. So again, really look for those ones that are fortified, so that you are making sure that you are getting enough things like calcium for healthy bones in your diet.
The protein level in oat milk. So oat milk often lower in protein, but barista style may be higher. I don't know if you know anything about the barista style plant-based
don't know
milks.
the difference, but if I was to sort of recommend a plant-based alternative that was similar in terms of protein levels to cow's milk, I'd be recommending one of the bean type ones, so maybe soybean or pea. Now it depends again down to your preference and what it is. If you're having oat milk as part of it, but still consuming meat, but you may be doing it for sustainability reasons, and your protein levels aren't falling, then there isn't going to be so much of an issue there. So again, just looking at the whole level of your diet, and if oat milk is the one that you like, then that's great. I think go for it, as long as you're getting the ones that are fortified and you're sort of looking at your diet as a whole. So again, it is really about the balance. No one single food on its own is ever really going to be better than the other. It's about what you pair it with, the diet that you have overall over the course of a week, a month, as well. So again, just saying, even though we are talking about oats and oat milk and things like that, that doesn't sort of mean that you should disregard any of the other sort of alternatives out there.